everybody, this is Brent Ingersoll, and you are listening to the Speaking Of podcast. Today, we're speaking all about marriage, specifically conflict. My wife Melanie and I have been hosting conversations with friends and colleagues over the past few weeks, talking all about marriage and how to make our marriages better. And today we talk about conflict and the role of conflict and how to fight fair. I think you're really going to like it if you're married, and even if you're going to be married someday, or even some of these principles are just helpful for relationships in general. In any case, we hope you enjoy this conversation about conflict with my wife Melanie, my friends Anthony and Crystal Moore, and Andy and Carrie Broad. Here it is. Well, today we are into chapter 3. We're talking about conflict. The chapter is called Pick a Fair Fight, and the idea surrounding conflict in every marriage. And to help us talk today, I want to introduce, for the people who don't know who's here with us, these are our friends and colleagues here at King's Church. We've got Andy and Carrie Broad here to our left. I don't know how that's coming through to you on the cameras, and then to our right, we've got Anthony and Crystal Moore. Thank you guys for joining us today. Why don't, to get to know each other, you guys give us, we've been having to do this over the last few weeks, give us your quick flyover of your marriage relationship. Give us your A-zone story. How'd you meet? How'd you fall in love? The B-zone. And then, give us the Cole's notes of the deets of your guys' story.
You guys want to go first? Let's go first. Why don't you start telling them how we met, because that's a fun story, and then take it from there.
We met at university, and we were friends for a couple years first before we dated. We were like best friends, and then a couple years in, he realized he was madly in love with me, and then we dated.
I thought you were going to take it somewhere different with how the night we first met, but that's okay.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The night you first met?
Oh, he made fun of my name.
Oh.
My given name's Kareen is my first name.
Not Carrie.
Not Carrie.
Okay.
And so we had to wear, like, freshman orientation, had to wear name tags. And I walked up to, like, a group of people, big group of people, trying to meet people. I walk up, I'm standing there, like, awkwardly, quietly on the outside, and he turns to me, he's like, Kareen? That's a weird name.
First thing you ever said to her.
Yes, that is actually
I said it in a nice and fun way.
So,
I don't think she took it, though.
So it took you 2 years to dig out from under that.
Yeah, 2 whole years.
Essentially.
And then, so you guys started dating in college.
Yeah, we did probably closer to the end of college, and we were really good friends for a long time first, which I think helped us a lot, and it's kind of set us up for success long term, and best friends for a long time, and then finally started dating. Dated some other people, and just...
Before.
Dated other people before we started dating.
We kept our options open.
But once we actually pulled the trigger, then it was like we were all in, right?
You want to go steady?
But that's kind of how it was back then, right? That's kind of pretty much probably how it went.
Yeah.
But and then it's been awesome ever since. We've always worked together since day one. We got married, did like one more semester of university, and then moved into our first job and like started working together right off the bat, and have never stopped. So we're together 24/7 all day, every day. Days on and days off. So and that's just been our normal.
Not every couple
and we're still
can
here.
do that.
It's true.
Yeah,
I don't know if we could. Maybe.
It's not for everybody. You definitely can't recommend it for everybody.
You don't know until you try.
I suppose.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Never know anything different.
Give us the zones flyover, Morse.
Well, we could never do what we did today, or else it would be bad.
Yes, that's true.
So Crystal was in youth group, and I was a youth.
We had one of these last week.
I had
Pastor John.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Like, Willow
That's
Ann was
We took
9.
So Crystal was 17, basically, and I was a youth leader. And then just, so there's 6 years between us. So I would have been 23 when it started.
So we became friends.
Yeah, we became friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was leading the Christian Fellowship at the high school and did some work there. And then that's sort of how and you were sort of leading it from the student side.
Yeah, we kept having these like different points where we kept working together and spending time together. So we became friends, and then it was like...
Then you became obsessed with me.
I did.
And who
not
could
in a
blame
weird
her?
way.
No.
She
This
was
is not creepy at all. Although Crystal's parents did not like the idea in the beginning.
No.
I'd be over my dead body.
Yeah, pretty basically. But we did it well, reasonably well, I would say, that we honored some of their wishes. not saying that there was never any sort of like covert walks on the golf course or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we did well. Mm-hmm. And then when Crystal turned 18, we officially started dating.
Yeah.
So
and then we dated for 3 years. So
dated for 3 years. Crystal was in college. I went back to college too during that time.
Yeah. And then it's like the weekend after you graduated.
Right. We got married. Yeah.
So.
And married I'd say we were A-zone for at least a year, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, A-zone for at least a year. We had a pretty. I remember we talked a little bit about how other people said their first year was the hardest, and we didn't necessarily go through that until
it was really
year.
fun.
It was really, really fun for us the first year.
But then it was like it flipped.
Yeah, and then
then we had our turn.
Yeah.
So describe. Yeah.
Yeah. When would you say you moved into the B zone?
I don't even know if we could say when.
Yeah, it was definitely. I know where we were. I know where we were living when we moved into the B zone.
Where were we living?
We were living at the Taylors.
That was the first year of our marriage.
I know, but it was like near the tail end of it. We lived around, like it would say the tail end of it.
Yeah.
We just had some, I don't know, that's my first recollection of maybe some difficulty and disagreements about how to do life.
Yeah.
Right? So that's my first recollection of that. But by and large, I say with the first year, that's always the way I sort of frame it in my mind, that the first year
was just fun.
When did you guys hit your B zone?
I had kids.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
The same thing for us. Everybody told us the first year is going to be the worst, and we were like, man, this is awesome. But I think it's when we started having kids, and then
and
sleepless nights and all that, right?
Well, and we had kids in the States, and so maternity leave is only in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And so going back to work 6-7 weeks in, trying to manage that and working full time, both of you, was a little rough.
Yeah. America doesn't mess around.
No.
No.
6 weeks, you're back.
And you have to pay for the delivery and all, like you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Bills and
It's interesting.
Your
It's
insurance.
interesting though. Like every couple, I don't think there's one way to hit the B zone. Like 'cause for us, we hit it fast, but then when we had kids, I think that actually helped us work together. We needed a common enemy.
Took it all out of the babies.
So when would you say you guys moved past the B zone into the C zone? Like, what did that look like for you guys?
Well, for us, I feel like things got harder when we had our first child.
Sure we did. Sure they did.
And I remember we felt kind of like dumbfounded by it. We were like, what are we supposed to do here?
Right.
And it took a while to get out of that.
Yeah, it did. It took, and it was like not short. It was, I think we can sort of agree that we had our lowest point in our marriage, like the year between our kids? Was that somewhere?
Yeah.
It was somewhere around there, because our kids are 2 years apart. So the year between our kids was definitely the lowest point in our marriage, and so we were definitely. I don't know if we never seriously considered it, but we had it was you wondered how we were going to move forward in that, given that we couldn't really stand each other.
Yeah.
Right. And that was we did have that frank talk about, I just remember, like, we've told the story about that one night where you were crying and I was like, okay, let's talk about this in the morning kind of deal. And then we did, and then we actually just said, from that point on, we said we're going to work on our marriage, and then it kind of went up and to the right after that.
And you started to change too.
Sure, I did. Yep.
Because you just, like, your intimacy with the Lord, like, there was a major change there for you.
There was, yes.
And that really made an impact on how we interacted.
Yep.
Essentially, and then it even compelled me to change my relationship with the Lord.
Yes.
So I feel like we grew closer to the Lord, and then it was like things just got easier for us.
Yeah, they did.
So
I think everybody probably can identify though with that moment like you just described, where you're maybe not thinking about divorce, but you do have that moment of like focus on like a fear of, I'm playing this out forward in my head,
Yeah.
and I don't see this going well. Like, can I stand this for the next 20
Yeah.
years or 30 years? And everybody has been there. I think the difference, and this is why I think today's conversation is so important, and what you guys are describing, I think what we've been exploring in the book is that, to not run down the road according to maybe your fears or your frustrations, but actually, like you talked about, like making that decision to work on, to actually like fight for this, and to realize that conflict and these tensions are actually there to give birth to something better. And now I know this is gonna be a hard conversation for these three couples to have, because none of us ever fight. But let's talk about conflict. So maybe to get things going, do you guys ever fight? What's the freshest example of something that you're maybe you fought about recently and
That you don't mind sharing.
that's safe to share, or maybe safe to laugh about now?
Well, we fought about a window.
We fought about a window. Yeah. So here's the setup. The setup was at my house. Crystal has an office, and I have sort of a separate, like, we have 2 bedrooms, one each office. And I was sitting there, and we were something about
It was
whether
nighttime.
it was nighttime, and whether or not if the latch didn't come down or not, whether it was actually secure.
Like safe.
It was actually
From
safe.
intruders.
So from intruders.
So I wanted
And
him
so-
when he went to
'Cause
bed.
you never
to
know
latch
who's
to
gonna
latch
sneak
it.
in.
And to be fair, she's
know.
never
Raccoon.
actually ever to that point. We've been in the house for 2.5 years,
This is
or
pretty
2 years
raw.
at the time.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Was
it's
this
pretty raw.
yesterday?
No. It was a COVID fight for sure, like cooped up in the house. But she came in, for some reason she made the comment of like, make sure you pull the latch down so that it's latched. And I was like, it's fine. I just cranked it shut. And then it was like,
We got pretty heated because we both felt very strongly
yeah,
that we were right.
yeah.
Anyway, he leaves it unlatched now.
Maybe put in the chat.
So he won.
He won the fight.
Maybe this will be fun, because I think this is a bit therapeutic for us all, because for real, we fight about the
Yes.
like the
Yeah.
dumbest
We
crap.
really do.
Like
Right.
like when you boil it down and you get out of your emotions, and you're like, wow,
That's true.
Or when you
That's true.
say it
A
out loud
window
to
latch.
other
A window latch.
really? So
Yeah.
so that we don't feel so exposed here, why don't you guys share what your latest stupid fight was that you're able to share? So far the winner is the window latch.
Andy and Carrie.
Can you think
Do you
of
even
anything?
have-
Because I'm genuinely, like, it would be, my gift is that I just move on, right?
Ooh.
Right.
But that's probably something that we fight about. is
Gift?
that
Way
I'm-
to go, Jesus.
I
Way
move on.
to go. Look at
No.
That is
Jesus.
probably the point of all of our fights.
I was just gonna say, this is probably what our last. I can't say this for sure, but probably what our last fight was about was the fact that I just like don't want to talk about it enough. Like I'm just like, oh, that's in the past. It happened. Like,
5 seconds
Yeah,
ago.
that's not ideal.
My gift
but
to
what's
you,
the point of
Carrie,
dwelling?
is
Let's
that-
just move. Let's just move past it.
avoidance?
And keep going.
Is that what you do?
Yes, let's call it that. That's a strong word, Mel. But I think
I'm
probably
just saying
yes.
it because that's how I
Yeah.
go.
I don't think it's avoidance. I think it's like this isn't worth our time and energy and
Yeah.
effort to
Right.
focus on this. I don't. He's not an
Yes.
avoider, but it's like what
Right.
I think is something that's worth addressing is so far below what he thinks is big enough to address that that's more the heart of it.
That happens to us too.
Yeah.
And because she can tell my heart's not really in discussing this or resolving this because
Right.
it's not bothering me anymore, even though it's
Right.
bothering her, and I don't pay enough. I don't put enough weight on that personally, and probably that's even more aggravating.
Yeah.
We,
Adds
That's
weight
true.
to the
Yeah,
to
so
her
it either-
side, yeah.
Yes.
So it'd either be like something like that, or even because we do work together, there's been a couple times where on my end I feel like I have to remind him I'm his wife, not just a colleague. And-
or employee.
I was gonna use that one.
Hey, you work for me. Don't
So-
ever.
Yeah.
Oh.
A colleague/employee that I'm sleeping with, which
Yeah.
is like that can get
That's
dicey.
complicated. That's
So-
That is
complicated.
complicated.
Yeah, good thing we have a good, healthy shared leadership style here, where
Yes.
everyone
Yes.
has a voice.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. Hey, it's worked out great for us
Yeah.
for the most part, but sometimes
Yeah.
I need a little reminding and straightening out, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
to be fair.
When we tried it, we were racking our brains like what our last. We remember vividly our last
It
fight.
was bad.
Very bad.
But we don't remember what it was about.
So that's just pretty
Probably
typical.
says it wasn't super important.
No, but we are all up in our
But
emotions.
we were really fighting.
We were.
Yeah.
It was actually leading into this though. It was like the week
It was
before
the
we
week
did the
before
first
the
one of these.
podcast, yeah.
Demons is what it was.
Of course it was.
It was the
It was-
enemy.
It was demons.
Actually, you know
Yes.
what? I have a. This might not be our most recent fight, but it's just a story that I want to
Oh,
share
no,
because
I'm
it's pretty
nervous.
funny. You know but it was like we were driving home. We were on a road trip, and I had one of those giant Costco-sized bag of M&Ms in the car with us. And so like I'm just woofing these things down, right? Road trip as you do. We're going along, and then I did something that aggravated you. We were just kind of playing around. We had the kids in the back seat with us. I did something that aggravated you, and you were just like, fine. And you rolled down your window, and she started taking handfuls of my bag of M&Ms and just whipping them out the window. And so I'm like, Carrie, those are M&Ms that I paid for. That was an expensive bag
What
of
are
M&Ms.
you doing?
And she's just chucking these out the window. And so we were kind of laughing about it, and then found out later on when we get home that the kids didn't know we were kidding, and so they were like,
They were super
like
upset.
like Mom was throwing Dad's M&Ms out the window.
No,
while we were
no,
driving."
it wasn't when we got home. Carter internalized that for like months.
Oh,
And like it came out
no.
months later that he thought I was being this horrible person.
Oh,
Flipping the M&Ms
no.
over Dad.
Well, we
Which
need to
is-
talk
you
about
watch
the
it,
fighting in
but
front of
you
the
said
kids
but-
thing. We should
Oh,
we should
yeah,
get
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
get we'll get there.
Yeah.
But so I think the biggest thing though is, and this is probably the number one mistake that we all make at some points in our marriage, is that we make the assumption that fighting is bad or that conflict is bad.
Yes.
And I think the case that they're making, and I totally think they're right, is it's actually necessary
Yeah.
and is the very mechanism that can actually lead to more health. I think they had some really good quotes about kind of setting up, like framing in what healthy
Yeah.
conflict is. Like there was one about it being a fair fight. A fair fight should never diminish a couple's love for each other. It should
Yeah.
increase it. I thought that was really kind of the heart of what conflict really should be all about. Is we need to go into this issue, and if it's an issue to you, it has to be an issue to me,
Right.
and we need to actually dive in there. So maybe the question worth asking is, how has your understanding of conflict evolved over the years? Like when you think back to your early days in marriage, and then what is the conflict dynamic? How has it evolved, and what does it look like in your relationship? Because we're all different. You usually have someone who's conflict averse and someone who's not, and you have somebody who's fast to forgive and somebody who's maybe a little slower. And what's it look like in your guys' context? How's that evolved?
And would you say you agree with that quote that a conflict would increase? How did he word that?
That it would
Increase your love for each
Yeah.
other, not
Right.
diminish your
Right.
love for each other.
Oh gosh, I think I'm the conflict averse one for sure.
You are, except I'm thinking about how I would hold things in for
Yeah.
a really long time,
Right.
which would build resentment inside
Yeah.
of me, and then I would get explosive,
Right.
and then I would confront you,
Right. And
but then we would get nowhere.
and then I would take that and I would hold that in.
right, because you
Right.
didn't
and then I
like
would be
the
like,
the
to avoid the
anger.
conflict.
Yeah, so I learned to actually bring things up before I let the resentment build.
Right.
And so it was
And then
like,
I learned eventually to open up more quickly after the conflict.
yeah, like it would take you a long time to
For sure.
to move past it, but I feel like we needed time to figure those things out about each other.
We did. Yeah,
It would have
absolutely.
been nicer if we'd figured it out sooner.
I know. If we
But-
had I feel like if we had a little bit more self-aware conversations about those kinds of things, a little, because we didn't. Eventually, we got to them, but I feel like if we had maybe a little bit more time to just acknowledge the fact that that was a real dynamic and be okay with that and learn that that's not an uncommon thing, and it's not bad or wrong. It's uncomfortable, but it's not a bad or wrong thing. We're actually working. There's some greater purpose. There's actually to what we're actually doing, even though the fight is your focus is very narrow, and you're in everything's centered around this one issue, right? You lose sight of the fact that we're actually working something greater out and onto a greater good.
When you think about those interpersonal dynamics, because I think every relationship has them. I'm the one like Crystal in our relationship where I don't bring up an issue and I'll just stew on things until I blow, and so I'll hold and then finally I'm just nasty for days or whatever. And it's like, we've had to learn our dynamics. The interesting thing is when you think about our relationships, like the thing that ticks you off the most about the other person is actually the thing that attracted you to them in the first place.
Messed up,
like,
isn't it?
It's super messed up. You know, like oh,
study on that.
Andy's so carefree and easygoing. He doesn't care about my things, right? Like, and it's like the very thing that we loved about that person, then in that, you know, that vacuum all of a sudden becomes the thing that drives us bonkers.
Yeah.
But how's your guys' evolved?
Well, I would say that, like, because I had more room where I needed to evolve and grow, I would probably say that I've grown the most in that area, because I had a really, really unhealthy view of conflict before, like, when we first got married.
Right.
And my, like, with conflict, it was for me to win and to cause equal, if not more, pain that I was in. And so I was not, like, healthy in my conflict at all when we first got married. I just had never seen a healthy example or lived out a healthy example before that. And so that creeped in to our, like, how I address conflict. And so I'd lash out and then I would retreat before he could do anything back.
Right.
Was my, so I would explode and then I would, like, literally go in the room, slam the door as hard as I could, and then, like, not let, like, and then say, no, we're done.
And that's connected a lot to your childhood and upbringing.
Oh, totally. Like with how I can't remember an instance of healthy conflict in my home growing up, and so I didn't know anything different than it. And so Andy he was patient, did a great job, just helping me to realize. I remember specifically this one time, like, I was blowing up something that must not have been that big of a deal, and he was like, I just don't understand why you're yelling. Why can't we just talk about this? And it was just, like, in a simple phrase, but it was this moment that I was like, yeah.
Hey, you know what?
Why is that? And so I think it's funny now because I would be the one that would address conflict easier now.
Yeah, when did that flip?
I have
You
no
have to say
idea.
this out louder now, because you're right. At the beginning of our marriage, I would say, no, let's talk about this. Let's not put it off. Let's get it out on the table. And now that's totally flipped, where you're like, no, like, what are you thinking? Tell me what you're not saying what you're actually thinking. And I'm like, stuffing it down.
Yeah.
Maybe those things do seasonally flip around. Like I think I don't know what you would say. I think our first, like, year and a half together, I'd never had a girlfriend before that I was in, like, a serious relationship with, and I just catered to your every, like, I would not push back on anything, anything. And then, like, just
It's kind of nice.
'cause-
She's like,
Can we go back?
for real though, like, no, but she's older than me. She had a career.
Yeah.
She had her life together. She's in a different, like, she's prettier than me, and so I'm just sitting here, like, thinking I just need to not wreck this, right? So, like, everything just was as you wish, ma'am. and then I think maybe that might have been some of what shifted too within our first year, was like, you got the real me, you know, and it wasn't just like I was just pretending to give you everything you wanted.
Your real self came out.
Yeah, which
You were hoodwinked.
fortunately you were. Gotcha.
This is not what I signed up for.
But I think there was a level of that
Yeah.
where it took us, like, getting the raw and the real, you know.
We hashed it all out in the beginning.
And you actually took a hard, like, you know, you played into that too, though, where it's like I was the pursuer, and you didn't put that, like, away at all. Like, you didn't. It wasn't an even exchange at first. As far as our conflict, it was. I did not want any conflict at all.
I dare say it's the opposite.
Yeah. So back to
Yes,
Andy's.
good. There we go.
Back to Andy's. I think it's flipped.
It flipped.
Yeah,
Isn't
it
it
did.
weird how that
Yeah.
happens?
It is weird. Not probably. I don't know if that's anybody else's experience, and maybe it'll flip again. Who knows? Maybe it's just seasons and stages.
We're also completely different people than when we first got together too, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
you changed
we've
so much.
grown and changed. We've been married for it'll be 13 years this December, right? So
Good job.
like it's
Oh, he would
I actually
remember way
remember more
before
than
me.
her for this. I never had that pressure of not remembering the anniversary because I
Us
usually
too. Us
before
too.
her, which is I'm fine
Totally
with
chill.
that. But yeah, it's weird how that changes. And to answer your original question, Mel, that I don't think I ever actually answered was yes, I do agree that conflict actually deepens like intimacy in a relationship, because I would say some of our like healthiest and most fulfilled and contented seasons with each other in our relationship have been those ones that are directly following a big
it's
fight,
true.
right? Because you get it all out, and you say, and it's when the things start to creep back in, and someone like me who has a tendency to just, well, that's not important enough to fight about or schedule a fight about, so I'll stuff it down, and then, but it creeps in and it sort of eats away at you bit by bit until you
Yeah.
have the big explosive
Right.
conversation or
Well,
fight.
yeah, and I remember this one time we had this fight that was where it was like how I was talking before, where I was focusing on something, bringing something up, and Andy was like, I just don't think that is that big of a deal. And it was just this revolving fight that just we kept coming back to, and just it wasn't going anywhere. And then he said something to me. He said, he goes, I don't know why you think our marriage is so bad. Like, I think we're doing okay, is the phrase that he used. And I was like, yeah, we are okay. But
Right.
why, like,
Can't
why
be
could we ever
better.
settle for just being okay? And I think
good.
that would have been our pivotal, like, it kind of
Right.
brought it all to a head of like, yeah, like we don't accept okay in anything else in life. Why would we want a okay marriage?
Right. And I think there's a give and take too with like, sometimes it's hard to know like if one of us has an issue and the other person doesn't think it's a big deal. Sometimes they're right, and sometimes it's just not a big deal, and you just need to like breathe for a day, and then it's not a big deal. But if that if it's a persistent thing, and one person says we have an issue and the other person doesn't agree, you have an issue.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Like, and it's not and that's one of the hard things that we've had to learn too, I think, is caring enough about, okay, well, if that's a problem for you, because I would minimize maybe some of the things that you wouldn't, so, but I love just the idea though of, I think they talked about like maturity over harmony. And I thought that was a really good way to look at it. And back to your point, Carrie, about like let's try to get this relationship to a place of maturity and health, and not just, okay, we can get along.
Yeah.
Like let's go beyond get along.
Yeah.
And I would say, that's kind of jumping ahead, and I don't know if you guys would all say this, but I would say after 15 years of this, like we do fight way less.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And-
it's a major difference.
Yeah, and they're way shorter. When we do fight, they're still epic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
You
and
get your money's worth.
well, part of it's our personality too. Like we for the Enneagram nerds, like she's a 1 and I'm a 3, and like that means like 99% of the time we are just locked in. We see things the same way. We're motivated by the same things. But then when we differ, it's freaking World War. Because
And we're
I'm
both
right.
Yeah. I think
But-
one of the things I wanted to mention is like even earlier on in our relationship, and we've talked about this, is that there were, for the sake of harmony and maturity, that kind of thing, is that like even in our conflict, like you were mean in a lot of ways to me,
Yeah, I was.
and I wouldn't tolerate that. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't just take it. I guess that tolerate sounds kind of harsh, but I wouldn't just sit there and take it. But I would always be willing to wade into the mess a little bit for the sake of like, okay, this actually can't continue like it is, because it won't be healthy,
Yeah.
right? And so then we worked through that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, because you came from a family where there really wasn't conflict.
Correct.
It was a very calm, peaceful household.
It was, yes.
And I came from a home where there wasn't constant, intense conflict, but the way that we communicated was very different from the way that your family
Right.
communicated.
Right.
So I let my emotions rule our conflicts.
Right.
And when I compare how we fight now, like
Right.
the emotions, they're still there, but they're not in charge anymore, right? And they're not so big in the way that they used to be. And I definitely appreciate the fact that you were like, you can't treat me this way. And I actually remember you saying, it would never be okay for me to talk to you the way that you talk to me. And it was like mind blowing. I was like, oh my gosh, he's right. Like it would be awful if he talked to me the way I talk to him.
Right.
So
I think you guys, and then that's a similar point to what Carrie said. Like we do bring to the table the environment we grew up in is informing
Yeah.
big time. Like, because I mean, you've been part of the Ingersoll family for a while. Like we actually like to fight.
Yes.
Like there's an actual, like
Yes.
There's an art.
it's I don't even know. It's like we just like a good debate, and like
Yeah.
we're unbelievably competitive, and like it's actually a term of endearment. Like it's
Like
you
that
know.
sparring.
Yeah,
Like
it
that,
is,
like-
and so, but your
I
family's
hate it.
super. You guys are all like really calm and introverted, and like there's been times where and I think I've gotten better at this, where I've really hurt you with words, and I wasn't actually. To me, it was just cheap. It was just firing words, and like to you, it cut really deep. And like again, like I think the key, and they're gonna get us to this, is like, you know, seeing each other. You know, in the fight, that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Is like we usually just kind of hunker down in our own
Yeah.
our own little bunkers and start lobbing our grenades at each other. So they talk about though, like I love that quote about like winning. Do you want to read that? What if one person?
If instead of one person's hand being raised in victory at the other's expense, we could finish with both of our hands raised in victory?
That's really good.
Yeah, I love that. And they said, like, in marriage, there really is no way for one person to win and the other to lose without the marriage losing itself. And I think, like, and I'm hearing that in our conversation here, is like even as we've advanced in conflict and marital health, it's been as I've been able to understand you more and us as a collective, that's actually the secret. So they give some guidelines on how to do this, and I appreciate that, because like generally we just sort of
Go ahead.
run in like on Anchorman, like with the brawl, you know.
That's exactly how it is.
You got to keep your head on a swivel, right? Like, so, and that's how we tend to fight. We just, you know, and it's like, this is really challenging what they're putting here, because it does require a lot of intentionality and self-control and discipline. But I actually think they're onto something. I really do. And when I first glanced over, it was like, who can do all of this?
I had that same
In
thought.
It feels
like
unrealistic.
step one
Yeah.
through, but I think they're just trying to give you helpful guidelines, and like I don't think they actually, you know, okay, Marcia, step one, you know, I think they've actually worked this
Yeah.
out over time. They're just trying to give you steps
Yeah.
to be able to do this in a healthy and constructive way. And I did think like these values, like they talked about these guidelines, and I highlighted some of them, like the pre-fight rules. They talked, rule 1 is pick a fair fight. So either member can call it and just say, we need to talk about that, right? Like, and I think we sort of covered that. And then summarize the issue, right? So this is what we're going to talk about. Okay. And then schedule the fight, which that's what we've not been good at.
I think that's hard though, because when you're angry and you're worked up,
Yeah.
that's
Let's go.
hard to
That's when
step
you
out
want
of.
to.
Yeah,
Totally,
you want to do
totally.
it right then. It's
I
hard to
know.
take a
Yeah.
step back and say, okay, we're going to discuss this at a later time.
I know, and it's hard to not like subconsciously fight one another. Like,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like, because even if we scheduled
yes.
it, I'm like getting
You're
little digs in. I'm,
preparing
I'm slamming the fridge shut
I
and
know.
like,
Right.
you wait till tomorrow,
Yeah.
lady. You
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're already having the argument in your
Oh,
head.
totally.
You're playing it out, all the options.
Yeah, that's the
Yes.
piece that would, like, even when we were reading that, I said to Andy at first, I was like, I don't know about all this. And I said, I would be afraid to give you
Time.
time. For real, though, because then he can talk
Yeah.
could talk himself out
comes
of,
in with a
or,
briefcase.
Like,
Yes.
I mean, he would be able
Present
to
my
have me
case.
apologizing at the end for something he did.
Right.
I said, and we were
What's wrong
laughing
with
about it. And then he says, well, you just have to trust me enough that that's not what I would do. And I was like, ooh, okay, yeah, that's true.
That's what
But then I
you
have to-
say.
Right.
You would say that.
Yeah. But then I have to actually not do that.
Yeah.
Too.
Coming in with a briefcase and legal pad.
Right.
Your
But
Honor.
I think about how it takes the intense emotion out of the equation.
Yeah.
Right? So you have that time to calm down. I mean, maybe you schedule the fight for 30 minutes or an hour.
Yeah.
But you still would cool down, and I think
For sure.
that would help me, even when it comes to not even just anger, but crying. Like, it's really hard to talk when you cry.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's actually
Yes.
probably one of our
Same problem,
greatest
Crystal.
one of our greatest, like, not one of our greatest, yeah, maybe a big frustration in some of our conflict has been emotion, and the
Right.
emotion where it's like one person, typically me, maybe always, probably always, like that I want to let's discuss the details. And I tend to approach it in a more logical and an unemotional fashion. And then Crystal,
And I can't
Right.
separate the emotion from it
right,
because I feel so strongly about it, and so
And it's typical too for the emotional person if you're not getting, because if you're the emotional person and you're crying, you're like, okay, trump card,
right,
right? This should be over because this really matters to me, right? And the
I
other
don't know that I
person's
do
not,
that.
and all that does is make it even worse, right?
Right,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, here come the waterworks, okay,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like,
yeah,
so
Yeah.
anyway, it's so real, and I do think though, like the scheduling thing, I think is worth trying. We've
It's
never
intriguing.
actually done
It
that.
requires a lot of effort, though,
yeah.
I know.
to step out of your anger. And
We
say,
committed to
It
trying it. The
does.
next time something does come up, we said
Yeah.
like, okay, we're gonna try this, give it a shot. Because
Yeah.
we've never done anything like that.
We haven't
before.
either.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll look exactly like that, but we're committed to
Yeah.
trying it out, and maybe want to
Yeah.
make some little tweaks or things that
just-
will work better for
Let's
us.
just
but
do this. Whoever does it first,
We
let
need
us
to
know.
talk about
How
Tell us
You're
how
gonna see
it
an
went.
Insta story, guys. We did it. Yeah.
It
Maybe it'll
worked.
happen
Well,
tonight. Who
I
knows?
do it with work. Like I try to anyway. I don't always. Sometimes like
Yeah.
I'll just be so hot to trot that I'll just send that email, right? You
Right.
know, or make that call. But
Yeah.
when I'm at my best, I try to do at least the 24-hour rule. Where if something comes at me and it drives me bonkers or whatever, like I try as per Dr. Buckingham's guidance on my life, like, hey, don't respond, breathe for 24 hours and then
Yeah.
respond because you're just gonna be way less nasty, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's worth doing. Then show up and fully engage. It's against the rules to miss a scheduled fight, but you need to show up at a predetermined time in a predetermined place,
A private
a
place.
private place. So like that brings up fighting in front of the kids. Do you guys have you guys done much of that? And
yeah.
So I'd say like here's the interesting thing is that I think it was a little intentional for me in this regard is that I grew up in a house where there wasn't any conflict, and I felt like I didn't know how to fight because of that. Like I didn't grow up around it where it was in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because I don't. Anyway, that's kind of my feeling. So I was like, okay, well, let's not hide this from our kids. Let's show our kids what it's like to have conflict and resolution, so that they're not completely thrown off. Because it's a part of a relationship. I don't know if our kids
don't like
Our
it.
kids
If
don't
things
like it at all.
Get heated.
And so I don't know how far, here they are, like our kids are like almost 12 and 14. And I would say that I'm not sure how well that experience is going.
yeah.
But I do see some value in it.
I think you're right. I think though there's maybe two categories of conflict, right?
Right.
There's the thing that we can kind of bat back and forth in stride, and then there's the thing that gets really emotional and
Right.
and gnarly,
Right.
and it's hard sometimes because sometimes that just takes off.
Yeah.
And there have been times where we've gone out of bounds with the kids in front of us, where like after
Right.
the fact, we're like, we should not have done that,
Right.
you know.
For
But
sure.
I do agree with you. Like your kids do need to see a certain degree of like, I think real, you know, and to know.
In the
that-
same way that your kids should see you hugging and kissing.
Yes, for
right?
sure.
And then just be like disgusted by you.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Like just
Yes.
enough already. So it's like, you see when we're mad at each other, but you see that we love each other.
And maybe that's a rule, though, like we could add to this is that, maybe there's some kind of mechanism that we could know if this is getting to, a 6 out of 10 on the Richter scale, we
Right.
need to we need to pick a fair fight here, right? Like, because there are probably fights that you don't actually need to get in the ring for,
Right.
where it's like,
Yeah.
we just had a little disagreement
Yeah.
and, whatever, and it's like, that stuff I think is okay to flesh out in front of the kids, but it's the stuff that where there's going to be tears and where,
Right.
because that really
Yeah.
does start to pull away at the security of their whole
Yeah.
world,
Right.
where they're like, if mom and dad can't get along, then who in the world can, So I do think you'd be careful about it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fine line.
Then it says keep it clean. That one kind of struck me. Like be careful with you always and you never and the below the belt stuff and the stuff that because you know each other so well, like is gonna actually provoke something or it's gonna hurt a little bit. And that's where I've tried to grow. I'm just fast in those moments, and more damaging than I'd even intended to be at times. And then you cry, and then I feel awful.
Feel bad.
Filled
And
with
you win.
regrets.
So it
And we
doesn't
go
have
we
to-
go right back to year one of dating.
Right.
Whatever you want, baby.
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
you want. Yeah. Can I get you something?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, for what? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm sorry, but I feel really bad. Yeah. Never throw in the towel. I think that's important too. Just about, staying in it until we're done. And they said something about like you need to dig down to the last 10% of the issue, right? Like to actually do the hard work to drive down deep enough so that it is actually resolved and not just partially enough that we can get on with this. But and then finish the fight the right way. They said, say I love you and hug each other. Hug it out.
Yeah.
That's a,
Regardless of whether you finish the fight or not.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think you could do if you give it enough time and space. Like if you schedule it, like I think a lot of that's contingent on actually scheduling it and saying, we're going to do this tomorrow night. And we're going to do it in a calm, we're going to try to hear each other.
Yeah.
But in the moment, you can't. There's just no hugging it out. It's like, get away
That's
from me.
telling you I
now.
love you right now.
Yeah.
Stuart.
And then pay the price for breaking the rules. They kind of created some incentive to sort of, I don't know what would work for me.
I was wrong and you were right. That was Kevin's thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had to say it 3 times too.
Yeah.
Just kill it.
Tap his heels together. That would be a motivator for you. You
Yeah,
don't like
but
saying
I
I was
hate
wrong.
saying
I can. It's cheap to me. I was wrong. Let's move on.
Yeah.
That's because
know.
you secretly don't think you're wrong.
Totally.
You just
What do you
say
want-
it.
What do you want to hear? What do you want to hear?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
lip service. That's where I get myself in trouble sometimes too. Carrie doesn't appreciate it when I'm apologizing for something, and I'll do the whole like, "I'm sorry you feel that way" kind of thing.
Oh, that's
I'm
the
sorry.
worst.
Like, it's like I can't quite say I'm sorry I did that, but I'm sorry
Right.
like if I hurt your feelings by saying something, I'm say, well, I'm sorry that hurt your feelings. And I am sorry that it hurt your feelings, but because I didn't mean it that way, then I'm not necessarily apologizing for saying it. And so it's
And that's when I escalate.
a loophole.
So, do you guys have any, like, before we jump into their system, do you guys have any other helpful rules that you guys kind of take into navigating conflict? Like, they've kind of put some good values out there. Is there anything you guys have found helpful for you that they didn't cover?
Trying to think.
What are some things you never do or you always do? Other than never say always or never.
Right. And we have worked through that. We have
Yeah.
worked through some of that
Yeah.
stuff too, right?
Where I would like just accuse him of always
Yeah.
doing something, and he's like, "Oh,
It's actually incorrect. Technically.
That really seems like not a big deal, like to just,
Mhm.
but it actually, if you can take always and never out of your vocabulary, it actually is a very healthy thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's such an not self-aware, not true
Right.
statement.
Yeah, and emotional. Like
Totally.
it's solely feeding on emotions.
Like we're just so far from ground zero here that
Yeah.
you're talking in. Okay, let's talk about their system. They outlined rules for what their fighting system looks like. And again, I think you kind of have to keep this in mind, like this is their way. But they did sort of highlight some values again. I think they had like 3 C's. They talked about communication. What's that other word? Compromise. And then they talked about counseling. Those were the 3. And then within that, they said, here's kind of how you can roll this out. So walk us through communication stage, Mel. What are they?
Stage 1, one person talks explaining their perspective. And I liked this. The less verbal person should go first.
I disagree.
Yeah.
Which I highly agree with.
Yeah.
So you don't
Yeah.
get steamrolled.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
we read that and we're like,
I was like,
that's us.
That's us.
Yeah, that's us.
And I like that rule.
Yeah, I legitimately think it's fair for sure. So
So yeah, stage 1, communication. One person talks, explaining their perspective. Number 2, the person who listened in round 1 must restate in their own words what they think was just said to them. So
Yeah.
reiterate what you just said to them.
to steel man their argument, right? To say so. Not, I'm sorry you feel that way,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to say
That's where I
so-
get derailed
Right.
sometimes. It's like,
Like I was we were joking around about this because it felt too when I first read through it, I was like,
Yes.
this just feels too like I'm in a
This is-
work conflict resolution
Yeah.
situation. But then so I was like tongue in cheek with it, and then like once I reread those a couple times. I was like, actually, for us, because the biggest issue usually is when I get in a conflict is I'm usually the one that has the issue. And then I don't feel like he hears me
Right.
or that he's understanding what I'm saying. And he's just like, yeah, just wants to get it over with. And so for him to have to articulate what he thinks I mean
Yeah.
would, I think, actually solve
changer.
a lot of our issues right away, because I then escalate because I don't feel like he's hearing me, and I want him to feel like how important this is to me, so I keep escalating, and then all of a sudden how I've escalated totally outshadows the little issue that was the issue in the beginning to start with.
Right.
So then all of a sudden that's way unhealthier, and that's way bigger how you reacted in that
Right.
than the fact that I didn't do this or whatever. Like,
Yeah, totally.
and so that to me, I was like, oh, actually, that could be
Well, and I
good
think
for us.
an encouragement that everybody's reading the book, like, don't get lost again, because when you do the first read through, you're like, who can do this?
Right.
It's a lot.
But if you just understand it as a value system
Yeah.
and a way to proceed,
Yeah.
I do think like, they're right at the heart of what railroads are fights is. We're not hearing each other.
Yeah.
And that's and
Yeah,
if
you
you can
just want to get your points
Totally.
out.
Yeah.
You're not
Right.
listening to what they're saying back
so
to you.
if you come to the table and say, okay, you say everything you want to say, and then I'm going to try to reiterate that to you in a way that you have to sign off and say, yes, you have my perspective right. You understand my perspective. Just that
Great.
is a
Yeah.
huge victory.
Yeah.
And then you flip it.
Yep.
And then it's okay, my turn.
And then the other person.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the other person has to restate it, and that puts both of you in the driver's seat, right? Like where we have an agreement that we have an understanding, and then once you have that, once it changes hands, so I explain myself, you explain it back, you explain yourself, you explain it. I like that. And, it doesn't seem as nice when you read 1 through 4, but when you put it that way,
It's
and-
more
Yeah.
simple than what
it
it
is,
seems.
yeah, for sure. And I would encourage anybody
Yeah.
to, we're going to do this next time around, right? We are. We are. For sure.
Give it the old college try.
No, we need to, because we both just, again, like everybody else,
Blow.
we just jump into,
Yes.
Right.
and trying to talk over each other or
Yeah.
overpower each other.
And it's actually a lazier way to fight. Like it's just I don't want to
is.
put in the work
Yeah,
of
it is.
actually going through a process that may be helpful. So
Yeah.
it's like I just want to
Yeah.
get into it and rip off the Band-Aid and get it over with.
Yeah.
But it's me being like not intentional enough
Right.
with the whole process.
And I feel better because I was able to yell and stamp my feet rather than resolve the issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's actually a far more destructive
Yeah.
approach to just when you're just going back and forth. When you actually, you're getting so much further, so much faster if you can schedule it, bring it in a
Yeah.
nice, here's my problem, and so and then they talk about compromise. So compromise, actually, there's a couple good things there. Number 4, the listener has to restate what was said. So we talked about that, but he talked about how there's no such thing as listening fast. I thought that was a really good quote. Is like you if you're doing this, which
Oh, what was the?
Yep,
yeah.
Land the plane.
The land, the plane.
yeah.
That was bad.
I was like, that is so something I would
I
do.
know.
I
I know.
you would say that.
Yeah.
I'm a
land the
fast
plane.
listener,
Yeah.
and it's not such thing. So
Stop.
thanks, Kevin. But he said most people's natural instinct is to defend themselves or argue their perspective, not to listen and restate what the other person has said. Even seasoned marriage veterans can stumble when it comes to communication and listening skills. And so I think that's just a huge takeaway that is worth heeding and hearing. And then to talk about compromise, this is the next rounds, and
Rounds 5 to 8.
rounds 5 through 8.
Of
Again,
12.
the rounds really do sort of take away a little bit, I think, from how valuable what they're talking about really is.
Right.
But the rounds 5 through 8. First, there's some cool quotes that we jotted down. Real love in real marriage requires real compromise. And then you like the John Maxwell one.
Yes, anyone who says there's no such thing as compromise has never been married.
Yes.
Love.
Yeah. I can hear him saying that.
Yes.
And then when couples focus on each other's differences, they tend to get stuck, get stubborn, and dig in unless they choose to compromise. It's the only way forward. And that's the thing. It goes right from that communication to our assumption is you're probably not just, if something is critical and major enough that we're going to get in that fight in the first place, we're probably coming at this from the opposite perspective, and we're probably not going to just I can't think of one time where we fought and like you just came over to my side. I don't think that's happened yet, right?
Yeah.
Or vice versa, where it's just like, you know what?
That's a good point.
You're right. I don't know. Maybe
Because that's
maybe,
just us. Though.
Yeah, but
Maybe
no,
other
I don't know.
people.
Is
Oh,
it,
never
does that, I don't
happened
think
to us.
that
No.
happens.
I
Like
don't think that
I
happens.
think we've already
Yeah.
thought through what
Yeah.
you and
Yeah.
so the best you can do is compromise. I think like you're just not going to. You're never gonna judo your spouse into your perspective.
Right.
And as much as you'd like to convince yourself, and some of us think we're pretty persuasive, but I'm 0 for a million here on on that one. So I like that. I like that they go right to compromise. Like that's your assumption. It's just going to take compromise, and you're going to have to figure out. You're going to have to negotiate where that zone that you can both live with is and what that looks like. So give us the rules of compromise, Mel.
Number 5, the less verbal person offers their solution, the other listens without interrupting. That's my favorite one.
Mel's like, we're doing this.
Yeah.
Love that one.
Are you finished?
I don't think you're supposed to say that.
That's not the right
Yeah.
What not to say? Yeah.
Number 6, the more verbal person offers their solution. Number 7, both people freely discuss possible solutions until they carve out an agreement. Number 8, if they successfully complete round 7, come to a compromise, they agree to pray about it until both feel peace that they can agree the issue is resolved and they're willing to commit.
Yeah. So negotiation is huge. In fact, if you want to read a good book on that, there's a book by a guy named Donald Trump called The Art of the Deal.
Please don't read it.
Would that be healthy? Oh man, The Art of the Deal. Actually, no, there is
That's not
one
the
good
book I thought you were
negotiation
gonna go
book
with.
Yeah.
called
That's the book I thought you were gonna go
Never Split the Difference. It's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He was an FBI negotiator, and you didn't know this, but I've been using that on you for years. No, I'm just joking.
Doesn't work very well.
It's not a good endorsement for his book. So I have yet to win.
Wasn't a marriage book.
No, it's not. But I do like that. It's just like the quote they put was conflict and compromise. He talked about it forced me to learn how to manage my calendar and my meetings. He was talking about his, they had a conflict about his work schedule, and he said one of the things it did was it forced me to learn how to manage my meetings, so I was no longer casual in my attitude and assuming I could get things done late. And I thought that was a good point because a lot of the time when we're negotiating, there's a bunch of personal fat that we're trying to hold on to that we don't want to give up.
Yeah.
That you're actually going to find if you go there together and you compromise, it's actually going to make you better as an individual, right? Like, so for him, he had to learn how to manage his time better, and he realized, and I've found that before too, where I'm like really stressed out, or I feel like I've got too much on the go, and you're not maybe understanding that a way that I want you to. Like I can identify with that very thing they're talking about, but you've actually made me better, and we've had to learn. I've gotten better at scheduling properly, doing the work I need to do, and not taking my own lack of discipline in my own personal responsibility out on you
Right.
in our relationship.
Yeah.
Right? And I think this conflict actually has a real way of sharpening us as individuals and making us better.
Yeah.
It forces us to do that. So
Isn't that the beauty of marriage, though?
that's really it, isn't
Like,
it?
I feel like it's because of him that I have changed so much, right? I would be this same old angry schmuck without you.
Schmuck.
I wouldn't call you a schmuck.
No, it is true. I mean, that's the beauty of. You're totally right. It's the beauty of marriage, and it's the gift of conflict. It's like that's the very mechanism that like God is actually. It's almost like a trick, right? It's like God like baits us into being attracted to one another, and then we get in this covenant,
Yes.
and we're stuck together,
Yes.
and then we actually have to like work it out. And He knows actually, Brent, the best thing that ever happened to you is getting this perfectionist who's an introvert. And you're gonna have to learn how to deal with that.
Here you go. Figure it out.
Yeah, and but it's true. Like she really has made me better. I think we would all sit here and say that. Like
sure.
I'm a way better individual
Yeah.
than I was 15 years ago. No
Yeah, for
question.
sure. And I'm on the other side of that, right? Like I would have been the introvert, and Crystal's pulled a lot of stuff out of me, and so that some of the stuff that even the fact like some of the details of our story and our conflict and all, like the fact that some of that is we're just sitting here freely talking about it, like would have been something like 20 years ago I would not have been okay with, right? It would have been it was very private. That was okay. That was as far as I went. But pulling that, and Crystal's just, if you know Crystal, she's just energy, and she has no hang-ups with like sharing things and being just open about our lives. And that was always something very uncomfortable, but she pulled that out of me, and then that made me a better person because of that.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
so if you can get to compromise, mission accomplished. Like really, if you're both happy, and I think that's the goal, is like, hey, keep repeating the process and like refining it until you can get to that space where you're like, okay, yeah, I can live with that, right?
And that works because it shifts the focus again from like for me to win or me to be heard to like for the marriage to win. Like that
Yes.
to say the second step's compromise. Like in most situations, for a second step to be compromised seems countercultural.
Yeah.
Like to compromise means to give, right?
Yeah.
Like to and so, but to automatically think like that's what you're getting toward, like that's your goal you're going towards, changes things even within that.
Yeah.
Because it shifts like, okay, why am I bringing this up? And it helps me to think like, is it even worth bringing up? Because I'm somebody who, in my head, out my mouth, and I want to deal with it right there,
Yep.
rather than, there are times like we've joked around a few times today saying, oh, like Andy doesn't want to, like he doesn't think many things are worth fighting about.
Yeah.
And I think things are worth fighting about too much. Even in those steps helps me to go, is it really worth bringing up though? Is it really worth making a big deal? Is there even anything to compromise on, or do I just want you to change?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I think one of the things though is like, as we grow in marriage and we grow in our relationship and intimacy and communication and conflict and compromise, there is a level of you should be getting better at it, and you should be able to like, I think as far as make a case for Andy's approach, like you should be able to determine what is actually a fight worth having and what's
Right,
not.
exactly.
And I think we've probably cut back on our, like we don't fight nearly as much as we used to. And I think a lot of that is we've narrowed down the list of issues,
Exactly.
and like I think that happens as a marriage gets healthier. There's probably always going to be conflict, and I'd imagine John and Willow Ann would be the first to say, but I can attest that it happens way less.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's the beauty of it too, is like you're getting better at being together when you have these conflicts. And so there's probably some people who are watching that like maybe they've never actually thought of it that way, or maybe they're newlyweds, or maybe they're in like the B zone, Q zone, red zone, and like the vision of this is like actually like if you just press in and do this right, you can get to a way better place. And I think they kind of make the point for that. But really quick, we're gonna be done in a second. But really quick, they talked about if you can't get to a place of compromise, bring in an outside voice, bring in somebody that's going to be able to give you some perspective. As I talked about, like the optional counseling rounds, the bonus rounds, hopefully you can get that knockout punch and you can stand the winner. That's not in there, but no. And so they talk about making a list of trusted friends. Do you guys have people like that you talk to?
Yeah.
That you do?
Like not officially, but there's the people that I would be really close to that I would know that they're the friends that can be honest with me. So if I go to them with an
They'll
issue,
tell you the truth. They won't just side with you.
they'd be like, "Yeah, you're being kind of a jerk,"
Right. For sure.
and I would listen to them.
Yep.
Right.
I do like that they do kind of say
Yeah.
it's got to be agreed upon though that's you like.
Yeah.
Like if I said I'm going to talk to my mom,
Right.
Your
he'd
mom's
be
always
like,
gonna-
she's going to side
she's
with
always
you.
gonna
What do you?
side
Of course she's going to.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think I do like that, and then
Yeah.
they do make a case for seeking counsel. If you're a Christian, I would say you should seek Christian counseling or pastoral counseling. Like that's such a huge piece in all this. But it's okay. It's a very helpful and healthy thing to do. And sometimes you do come to an impasse, right? Where you're just like, we can't agree on this, and we're not willing to give, and we might need another voice. And so we talked about bringing that in. And then he talked about bringing the referee in. Talked about like really inviting, to go back to last week's, inviting God in through prayer. Yeah. Like if you do come to a gridlock or a place where you just can't agree, it's probably time to go back to praying for one another and asking the Lord to give your perspective a shift. I thought that was really helpful. But the thing that really stood out to me there as we kind of wrap up, he talked about, there's a quote. Actually, I'd love it if you'd read this because, go ahead and read it. The quote about 95% of the time.
I found that 95% of the time I want to call for a fair fight. It's because I'm not living according to Jesus' standard.
I just wanted you to read that. So. I'm just
and that
playing.
concludes our episode.
Cut. We need to talk. Yeah. No, I think he's... Anyway, finish on. I was just joking.
Do you want me to finish?
I do, actually.
Instead of planning a fight, I need to absorb the offense and move on. Serve my wife better and move on.
Yes.
Or pray for Marcia and ask God to help her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think...
That's huge.
It's like, and I think we've laughed here over this time, like so many of our fights, I mean, they were worth having because they mattered, but in hindsight, they just were so stupid, and I think as we grow, not just in our love for one another, we grow in our relationship with God, it should actually start to cut down the fights, just for your own sense of care for them, sense of selflessness, like...
Yeah, and it's doing the best.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's something where we can get caught up in any sort of relationship, but even marriages, like, that we almost start to villainize and assume that there's malice there. And I genuinely don't know if there's been times in our marriage where there's been genuine malice, like, where it's, like, trying to, like, have a deceitful heart or whatever that is, that if we walk into a situation, assuming that it's just ignorance or stupidity rather than malice, I think that changes that quite a bit.
Wait a minute. Who you calling stupid? No, but that's such a good...
I mean, for me myself.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think we hit on this a little bit last week too, talking about like, and I think there's more evidence of it because we've all just talked about so many fights we've all had, and we don't even really remember what they're about. They're about a window latch.
So good.
With all due respect, Crystal.
I compromise. Let's just put that out there.
But it's we actually fight about the safety thing too. As I'd leave the house unlocked, I'd leave the cars I'd leave the keys in the car, and I just maybe just more
Women
trusting.
are more concerned about their safety.
Fair enough. So we lock the doors. We compromise. We lock the doors.
We live in the safest neighborhood of all of Canada. That's
I know,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right? She's like,
But there's
we
still
don't want to be that
crime.
statistic.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. I appreciate that you said that though, Brent, and you ended there, because that's something where I found with me in my life, like so often is, like I always ask myself, like the question I'm always asking myself in my head whenever something does come up, or especially if it's something stupid, like I'm not saying these are real examples, but it's like if it's something like, oh, that like the laundry isn't folded the way I would have folded it, or the dishwasher isn't loaded the way I would have loaded it, and like little things like that, I ask myself the questions like do I even have the right to be right about this, right? Like does it even matter,
Yeah.
right? And so like laying down my right to be right and just saying like I'm choosing to compromise even internally on this and just say like I'm not going to make a thing out of this. I'm going to wrestle that thing down inside of me that wants to be right or wants to bring it up and wants to be annoyed about it, and just say like, no, that's my own personal issue that I need to wrestle down. Like that's not her at all. It's 100% me. Yeah. And I've got to deal with this thing, and so I'm definitely not perfect, but God and I are kind of working on that together, and it has helped me a lot. So I appreciated that so much when you said that at the end. It's like, man, most of the fights we get in, I could probably solve myself a lot of times if I just would deal with my own crap. Before I dump it on her.
If you could just be, like, and this is probably a word to the wise for all of us that are Christian couples, like if we could just have kind of gospel glasses on when it comes to our conflict, like first and foremost, like Jesus came, to serve and to, so we're called to, wives submit to your husbands and husbands love your wives like Christ loved the church. Like we're called to lay ourselves down for each other. Yeah. And then to recognize too, to Carrie's point about like, to there might be, I need to give them the benefit of the doubt. I need to see their humanity, their value, and recognize like there are powers and principalities, I believe, at play trying to bring division and destruction into your relationship. And so many of our fights, if I look back, I'm like, yeah, okay, there was a spiritual magnetism on that way outpunted the coverage of what that issue actually was. And so it's like coming to the table of conflict before you have conflict, like to do self-inventory, maybe take it to the Lord and like, am I seeing them the way you see them, Lord? Am I seeing myself the way I should see myself? Is there a freaking demon? Like, is there like, cause that's real stuff. And I think if we can go through that checklist a little bit and then hit the other 12.
For sure. And something I just want to bring up is like, we know what the payoff looks like. Like we've seen the couples who are like in their 60s or in their 70s who are in love, but we've also seen the couples who are like, why are you guys still married? That are just like old and bitter towards each other. We've seen that. And I feel like if you do the work as you go along and don't sort of kick the conflict down the field, you see the payoff in the long run. So there's a lot of value into doing conflict really well and like giving yourself to that.
Totally. That's probably a good. I'll read this last quote and then we'll wrap up with prayer. But he said, "In the end, marriage is an invitation to learn how to love the way Jesus does. The more we can die to self and become alive to God, the more our marriage becomes a candidate for God's favor and blessing." I thought that was huge. So. You want to pray for us? You want to pray for marriages, Anthony, and like specifically in this area of conflict, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, Lord, we just thank you, Lord, for this time. Lord, thank you for marriage, Lord. It's a beautiful thing, Lord. It is a picture of how you love the church, Lord, and so I just say, Lord, in the middle of that, thank you for that model. Thank you for what you showed us about the laying our lives down and the submission and the beautiful picture of how that gets worked out, Lord. And just so, Lord, I just pray for everyone listening, Lord, and everyone watching this, Lord. I just pray a blessing on their marriage, God. And I just pray for just, Lord, for those who are without hope, I just speak hope over some situations, God, and where there is conflict, Lord, we speak resolution and peace, God, and where there is refining, Lord, we welcome the refining, Lord, that you're doing in us, Lord, as we go through these things. Lord, I just thank you for the beautiful picture that you're weaving in every individual story, Lord, just this amazing beautiful thing that you're actually creating. That everyone has a story. Every marriage is a story, and that when it's yielded over to you, it's for your glory, Lord. And so, Lord, I thank you for that, Lord. We pray for hope and peace, Lord. I just pray for even just like that love would increase, Lord. Even as ones that are watching would just even look at each other and just give a wink to each other and say, we're doing pretty good, babe. And so, Lord, I just pray for that, Lord, and I just want to celebrate marriage as, Lord, as you designed it, Lord. We just thank you for that gift that is, Lord. And so we bless your name, Lord, and we just pray for a blessing on conflict, Lord, that we would just learn to fight well and learn to fight for our marriage well, Lord. And we just bless your name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Hey, thanks again for tuning in today, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this conversation about conflict and it helps make your marriage and your relationships a little bit better. If you haven't already, take a minute. Would you leave a kind review? Would you share this for someone else? Would you help us get the word out? And we'll see you next time.